it's Kira, and today I'm very excited and also kind of nervous because I'm going to be filming a very Halloween-y 24-hour readathon. Now, the last time I did a 24-hour readathon was like 7 months ago, back in February, when I did a challenge trying to see how many of the Harry Potter books I could read in one day. And that was actually so much fun. So this time I'm challenging myself to see how many of these Stephen King books I can read in a 24-hour period, which I feel like will be a very different experience to reading Harry Potter, because I could be very traumatized by the end of this 24-hour period. But I'm really excited to challenge myself and see how many of them I can get through, and hopefully I won't be too like horrified and traumatized by the end of today. But it's currently about 6:30 on Saturday evening, so it's Saturday the 19th of October, and I'm actually not going to be picking up any books until later on, so I'm not going to be starting my 24 hours just yet. But I'm about to get some dinner, and whilst we're having dinner I thought I might as well get in the spooky mood, so we're going to watch Misery, which is obviously based on the Stephen King book, and that's on Netflix, so we thought that would be a perfect little thing to get into the spooky season and just get in the mood for this 24-hour readathon. So I'm going to sit down and watch that, and I'll catch up with you in a little while when I pick up my first book.
Got it.
Okay guys, so the time is currently 8:28 and I'm about to start the readathon officially. So I'm going to be starting at 8:30 on Saturday the 19th of October, and then reading as much Stephen King as I possibly can between now and 8:30 on Sunday the 20th of October. So obviously, as I already mentioned, we're currently watching Misery, and I'm just going to keep letting that play in the background as I read. But the book that I'm actually starting with is going to be Pet Sematary, because I saw it in the cinemas back in May when the new adaptation came out, and I've been meaning to read it ever since, so this seems like the perfect time to get started with it. So as you can see, I've got my little spooky reading station set up behind me. I've got all my lights and everything, and it looks lovely, and some scented candles. I've also made myself a mocha with some vegan whipped cream on top, and I'm ready to get reading. So Misery literally just finished, and oh my god, that is such a good film. I've obviously seen it before, but it's been quite a while, and it just never gets old because it's so shocking, and I just literally couldn't keep my eyes off the screen, which granted was not brilliant for my reading progress, but nevertheless it was an amazing film, so no regrets really. But I just feel like that one in particular, as Stephen King's books and TV adaptations go, is extremely creepy, just because most of Stephen King's things rely on some kind of like paranormal element, whereas that one is completely based in like reality, and therefore it just becomes even spookier just because it's like it feels a lot more real, so it's harder to separate from real life, and so it's just super creepy, and I definitely want to get around to reading that one soon, maybe even in this 24-hour period. But for now, I've obviously started on Pet Sematary, and so I'm currently only about 50 pages in because, as I said, my reading pace was a little bit slower, but now that Misery's finished, I think I'm going to be able to get a lot more read. But so far, I'm definitely enjoying it. It's not gotten to anything super creepy yet. It's kind of just introducing the family, and as they've kind of like moved into this new town and they're just kind of getting used to it. They visited the Pet Sematary initially, but nothing spooky has happened just yet, but I'm definitely enjoying it and hoping to sort of get fully into it now that Misery is done. Alright guys, so it is now just after 10:30. It's just about to go 22 actually, and that means I've been reading for just over 2 hours now, and I've just made it to just over 100 pages through Pet Sematary. And I have to say, in the last 50 pages the like spooky, creepy vibes are definitely ramping up because it's kind of delving a little bit more into those like paranormal elements. So I'm really excited to keep reading because it's definitely starting to get really creepy. And also, I'm not sure necessarily if this is just because it's one of the only other Stephen King books that I've read, but I'm definitely finding myself comparing it a little bit to The Shining and definitely noticing some similarities, which is great because I loved The Shining. But I think they do have some similar themes just because they're both obviously like horrors that centre around families, and also I feel like they both really play into that I guess like line between what's real and what's not, and kind of like sort of testing you as the reader, as well as focusing on the main characters kind of struggling to figure out where reality is and not knowing exactly what's going on around them, as well as the fact that both books also kind of mostly focus on the like father figure of the family. So I'm definitely finding it interesting and I'm really excited to keep reading. But I'm actually super tired already because I'm such an old lady. I'm already drifting off, and I've literally like dropped the book on my lap a couple of times because I've just drifted off to sleep, which is obviously just so classic me because I'm just so terrible at staying up late. Now I've just brushed my teeth, which has helped me to wake up a little bit, but I'm also going to do a little bit of an experiment because I have a feeling that doing headstands or just like flipping myself upside down might help me to feel a little bit more awake, because I feel like the blood rush to your head might like, you know, just like wake you up a little bit. So I'm going to do that now and see if that has any effect. But I'm 100 pages in, which is pretty good progress for the first couple of hours, especially considering that I was watching the movie for the first hour. So I'm going to do that, see if I'm a little bit more awake, and then try and get some more reading done. It's just after 11:30 in the evening, and I'm not gonna lie, hour 3 did not go as well as I'd hoped. The headstand didn't really do all that much to keep me awake. I'm now just over 150 pages into Pet Sematary, so technically I did read just as much as the other previous 2 hours because I've read about 50 pages every hour, but I kept falling asleep so frequently, so I definitely wasn't reading as quickly as I probably normally would have. But I'm definitely more of a morning person than an evening person, so I think for the sakes of this 24-hour readathon, I'm trying to read as much as possible. I'm going to go to bed now and then set myself a really early alarm, because I just know that I'll read a lot more in the morning than I will at night. So I'm going to get to sleep, try and sort of wake myself up a little bit, and then wake up early, probably around like 6 o'clock in the morning, and then just get reading straight away. Good morning guys, so it is now just before 8:30 in the morning, which means that I've got 12 hours left of this 24-hour readathon, but I've been awake for 3 hours-ish. I woke up just after 5:30 and I've been reading ever since then. Luckily I'm feeling a lot more awake this morning than I was at like 11:30 last night, which is great because I've made quite a bit of progress with Pet Sematary so far this morning, and I'm currently on I think page 323, which means that I've got just over 100 pages left to go, and I'm enjoying this book so much so far. It's really interesting, and I'm not sure that I'd necessarily describe it as scary, but it is definitely very creepy and unnerving. I think the subject matter is definitely more just like off-putting and uncomfortable rather than like super scary. Now obviously it could still get scarier, but it's kind of just that like uncomfortable creepy vibe, which I actually find really interesting, so I'm enjoying this one a lot so far. And I think the thing that's made me most uncomfortable throughout the whole book is that the book is written from like in just like a present tense narrative style, and it's from a narrator that's not involved in the story, and so you're just kind of following along with these characters and seeing what happens to them. But on 2 separate occasions now it's kind of like broken that narrative style style and kind of like jumped forward and told you about the fate of a couple of characters and what's going to happen to them, which just in the sort of flow of the narrative style really jumps out as being very weird, and it's so unnerving because you know that something's going to happen but you don't know quite how or when, so it just makes it even creepier. And yeah, I'm really enjoying this book so much because it's just super creepy and interesting. It's definitely different to the film because the narrative has kind of gone a different way. They were similar up until I guess about a page like 150 or something like that, but then it kind of splits off and starts adding in even more and going on a different style, which is even more interesting because it means that I can follow along in a different story and see what happens. But yeah, super excited to carry on reading, but for now I'm going to go and grab some breakfast, which is kind of spooky themed because I've got some Halloween branded pumpkin spice bagels, which sounds so good, so I'm going to go grab one of them and then carry on reading. Not gonna lie guys, those bagels were a bit of a disappointment. They were okay, but they were nothing special, so yeah, maybe don't buy them because they're just average. But I finished up with breakfast and I'm now just about to sit down and start reading more of Pet Sematary. I've got myself a cup of tea and I'm just going to sit down and hopefully try and blast through the last 100 or so pages of this and just get it done so that I can move on to my next read. So I'm currently about 50 pages from the end of Pet Sematary, and again I would just like to point out that this book isn't necessarily scary, but it is actually kind of gross. Like, I'm reading a little bit now, which obviously I won't go into because I don't want to give any spoilers, but it's honestly like turning my stomach. It's very like graphic and the subject matter obviously is very like unnerving and uncomfortable, so yeah, it's an interesting read. I'm not particularly squeamish, so I'm not like bothered about it, but it is like a very weird skin crawling reading experience, which is interesting. So yeah, about 50 pages left to go now, so I'm just gonna hopefully finish that in the next like half an hour or so. Okay guys, so it is just after 10:40 in the morning and I've finally just finished up reading Pet Sematary. I feel like this one has taken me ages to read, although it hasn't really. I just think because I obviously slept for a few hours in the middle, it feels like it's taken longer than I would have liked. But this was a very interesting read. It was, as I said, the main word that comes to mind when I think about it is just that it's unnerving rather than scary, and it's just very uncomfortable and creepy because it obviously deals with a very real subject, being quite centered around the theme of grief. And I think it does an amazing job of kind of exploring that theme of grief in a really sort of realistic way, but blending that in a Stephen King style with a very creepy paranormal element. And I guess that is what makes it such an interesting book, because it takes something that people can really relate to and sort of proposes this paranormal possibility, and it's really interesting to then think potentially about how you might react if you were faced with that same situation. So it was a really interesting book and I definitely enjoyed it, so I'm super glad that I finally got around to picking it up. I say I'd probably give this one a like 4 out of 5 stars. It wasn't quite a 5-star, and probably I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I enjoyed The Shining, which is so far my favourite Stephen King book, but nevertheless it was a really enjoyable read. Now the next book I'm picking up is definitely a shorter one, so hopefully I'll be able to read that one a little bit faster, and that is The Running Man, also by Stephen King obviously, but this one was actually published under his like pseudonym Richard Bachman, back when he used to write under 2 different names. So I'm excited to read this one because it basically sounds like an adult version of The Hunger Games, and I'm also quite intrigued just because obviously with Pet Sematary I had quite a clear idea about what I was going to be reading because I'd seen the film, whereas with this one I've got really no idea other than the fact that it's quite dystopian and Hunger Games like. So I'm excited to pick this one up, but before I do that, I thought I might do some like fun Halloween-y type activities. So I think I'm going to go downstairs and carve a pumpkin because last weekend I went pumpkin picking, and so I still need to carve one. So I'm going to do that and then probably make a drink and get started on my next book. Hello, Willow.
Watching it, shouldn't it, Jumbo?
Oh, she's so big, she's like a cat.
I miss
A little cat. Big cat.
Do you like being inside?
Such a big chunk. She got a fluffy butt.
She's got a fluffy everything.
Fluff, 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 fluff.
Willow, careful!
Careful. Come here, pillow. his slidey paws.
Oh, he doesn't like it inside.
His paws aren't together.
Oh, what a baby. Oh.
Sweet you. Oh, the hair.
He's in my hair.
The chinky. That's very good.
So it's just before 12 p.m. and I'm about 50 pages into The Running Man so far, and this is definitely feeling like a classic dystopian, just in the sense that it's got a very much like class-focused world system, and in this case the like lower class citizens are definitely being exploited by the higher class citizens for entertainment. So in that sense it's kind of feeling similar to me to like things like 1984 and Brave New World, just because those are also very clear like defined class systems in their dystopian world. But as I said, I'm only about 50 pages in so far, so I don't really feel like I've had much chance to like fully get to know the main character, so I don't entirely know how I feel about it just yet, but it is an interesting premise. So I'm just about to go and make hot chocolate just because I kind of fancy it, and then I'll pick up this and get reading. But I don't have all that much time left to do reading now, just because it was my brother's 21st birthday yesterday, so we're going out for a meal at about 1:30, so I've not got that much time until I need to leave. Okay guys, so I'm in the car because I'm obviously on the way to my brother's birthday thing, but I thought I'd give a quick update on The Running Man because I'm now just over 100 pages in. I think the book has like 240 pages altogether, so I'm a little under halfway, but I'm definitely enjoying it the more that I read. So it's just a very interesting concept. It's kind of like, obviously like I said earlier, a Hunger Games-esque type book, but it's centered around a competition which is very difficult and very violent, but if you win you get like a load of money. But I guess it's slightly different to the Hunger Games because I guess those people are kind of like picked out, so they don't really have all that much choice. In this situation, the like contestants get to choose to participate in the Running Man, which is the competition. Only it's kind of difficult to say whether they really have that much choice because a lot of them do it out of desperation because they're from such a like sort of low station in society that that's their only sort of prospect of making any money. So it's very interesting to think about like the ethics of it in terms of like, although people have a certain amount of choice, it's not really because they're in such an like unprivileged situation that that's kind of like their last resort. So it's very interesting, and I'm definitely enjoying watching the main character Ben and see how he's getting on. But as I say, I've still got about half of it left to read, which I'll have to catch up with as soon as I'm out of the meal. But whilst I'm in the meal, I'm actually asking Jay to nip into Waterstones to pick up another Stephen King book for me because I'm hoping that I'll finish The Running Man quite quickly when I get home and then move on to book 3 straight after that. So I've literally just gotten back from the meal and it's just turned 4 o'clock, which means that I've got 4.5 hours left in which to read as much Stephen King as possible. So obviously I'm going to be starting with finishing off the other half of The Running Man, but whilst I was at the restaurant, as I mentioned, Jay went to Waterstones and he's picked up 2 Stephen King books, so I'm just going to be surprised and see which ones he got me.
So this is the first one?
Okay, first up Misery, which I did ask for. This is such a cool like cover.
I've shown it on my one quite close.
Love it. Wow.
Cool,
Yep, so that looks, I love the typewriter.
Yeah,
it's kind of cool. I don't know if I'm going to read this one today just because it is kind of long, so we'll see.
You ready for the surprise one? Have you any guesses?
No. Ooh, Carrie! And that one is quite small,
Yep.
yes! Oh my god, and that's another cool cover. Nice. Okay, cool. Yay!
Good.
Okay. Oh! So it's just after 5:10 and I just finished up reading The Running Man. I think I'm going to end up giving this one 3 stars because I did enjoy the book, but it was kind of unsatisfying to me just because I know some books are like plot driven and other ones are character driven, but I found that in this book in particular it was so plot driven that I didn't find myself really being all that invested in the main character, because I think we kind of got to know Ben a little bit at the beginning of the book and found out his motivations for going into The Running Man, but then after that I feel like we don't really get much further development or find out any more about him as a character. And so although the book was like interesting and the sort of action was really like, you know, it was intriguing and it made you want to keep reading, I didn't find that I was super invested in him as a character, which is why it's not like that great of a read, just because I would have liked to have been a little bit more invested in him, because I feel like that would have just made it an even better book. However, I do find that it was quite an interesting book, particularly in terms of like looking at social inequality and also the way that like propaganda can help to solidify that inequality by sort of controlling how people perceive people in classes outside of their own. So that was really interesting and I did enjoy the book, but it just wasn't quite as good as some of the other books I've read, especially comparing it to Pet Sematary, which I felt like had a lot better character development. But now obviously I've got just over 3 hours left of this 24-hour readathon, so I'm going to get started on Carrie, which I'm really excited about because I feel like this is one of the most iconic Stephen King books / movie adaptations ever. Like, it's just so well known, and I've actually never seen the film, which is great because it means I have no major perceptions going in. I have a few things that I know of just because it's so like, I know some things that are going to happen just because of how popular it is, but I don't know a lot, so I'm excited to read this one. But I'm just going to light some candles, make myself a cup of tea, and I think in about 10 minutes Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is on TV, which I know isn't anything to do with Stephen King, but it does definitely have those like dark autumnal vibes, because I think Prisoner of Azkaban is just so aesthetic and just like so in keeping with this time of year. So I'm going to pop that on and get some reading done.
Lumos Maxima.
Okay, so I'm now 100 pages into Carrie and it's about 6:30, which means I've got 2 hours left of the readathon, so I thought I'd just do a quick update, even though I'm just going to keep reading for the rest of the readathon. But so far, for like 100 pages into Carrie, I'm really enjoying this one. It's a very compelling book because it's just got so much going on. Obviously, you've got this main character of Carrie who is a very like, I guess like an outsider in her high school. She's obviously a victim of bullying and she's just a very interesting character because she's been brought up in a very bizarre household, which means that she is kind of like, I guess, doomed to failure because she has no idea how to socialise properly or how to fit in with everyone in high school, which obviously doesn't excuse how everyone treats her, but it does make her a very interesting character and one who I definitely sort of sympathise with just because it's such a sad situation. But then her mum is a very interesting character as well because she has such like bizarre, serious religious beliefs, which is just always a very interesting topic because personally, I'm not religious at all, but I do find it interesting to see how religion can be such a like spectrum from people who just kind of like believe it and live a normal life, and then to people like Carrie's mum in this book who like take it to the extreme and are just completely wild with it. So it's a very interesting concept, and yeah, I'm really enjoying this book. Super compelling. And another thing that's very interesting about it is that it's written in the form of case studies, which I think is quite a unique narrative style. So it's taking like excerpts from what are supposed to be like journals and textbooks and books written after an event that is obviously going to happen later in the book. So it's really interesting because you're getting lots of different perspectives and it just makes it seem even more intriguing because you know it's leading to a really important event. So I'm really enjoying it and I'm going to get back to reading now because I need to get this finished in the next couple of hours. Okay, so 8:30 has officially come and gone, which means that my 24-hour readathon is officially over, and I'm super happy to say that I managed to finish Carrie with about 10 minutes to spare, which means that I finished a full 3 Stephen King books in 24 hours, and then I also managed to pick up the first like 15 pages of Misery just because I had a few minutes to spare and I fancied just getting started with that one and making use of the full 24 hours to read as much Stephen King as possible. But starting with Carrie, I really did enjoy this one. It was an enjoyable read and I found it super compelling, which was very useful because obviously I was cutting it to the wire and really needed to make sure I finished it in time, so it was really helpful that it was such a like action-packed and compelling read. And I think that the narrative style being sort of in the format of like lots of different journals and interviews and novels and referring back to lots of different perspectives made it even more interesting, because I always do find books with multiple perspectives to be a lot more gripping just because you get to see things from so many different angles. So I really enjoyed that, and just in general I think that the book had a very interesting premise and dealt with some really intriguing subjects. And I think going back to what I said earlier about Pet Sematary, I think it dealt with a very similar theme in the sense that both of them touch on stuff that could happen in real life. So whilst in Pet Sematary it was the theme of grief, in this one it obviously deals with like the way that religion and high school and bullying and those things can affect people, but then it's combined with a paranormal element, and I think Stephen King does that so well and just makes such gripping storylines because he sort of pulls people in with things that they can relate to, but then just makes it even more interesting because he brings in the paranormal as well. So that made this book so interesting for me, and I just really enjoyed it right from start to finish. I think it's definitely going to be a 4-star read as well, although I'd probably say this one was slightly less enjoyable than Pet Sematary just because I think Pet Sematary was amazing, but both of them were 4 stars and really great reads. Then of course, as I mentioned, I did pick up Misery and got through about 15 pages of that before the end, just because having watched the movie yesterday, it reminded me how much this was such an interesting story. I've seen Misery the film like a while ago, but I just was reminded of how interesting and creepy that story is, which made me really want to pick up this book. So although I didn't quite have time to finish it or even really properly start it in this 24-hour readathon, I'll definitely be continuing on the rest of this evening and into tomorrow because it just seems like such a gripping storyline, and even in the first like 15 pages it already seems like it's going to be super intriguing. So yeah, I'm really excited to carry on with this one. But that means that having finished 3 and a bit Stephen King books in the last 24 hours, I've read a total of 963 pages of spooky Stephen Kingness, and I had such a fun time doing it, so I'm really glad that I decided to take on this challenge. Now I'm definitely going to be continuing on trying to read more Stephen King because I just enjoyed all of these books so much that I just think I really enjoy his writing style. So if you have any recommendations that are not ones that I've already picked up, let me know in the comments below, because I'd love to hear more recommendations from other Stephen King fans because I just really want to pick some books up, but he's got so many to choose from that it can be kind of tricky to figure out where to begin. So definitely leave your recommendations in the comments below, and if you've also read the books that I picked up today, also leave your comments and sort of thoughts and feelings on them, because I'd also just love to chat about them because I had such a fun time reading them all. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing all of the books, and as I said, let me know your comments below and if you've had any similar or different thoughts to me on these books that I picked up. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.